Welcome back to the AUA Inside Tract podcast. My name is Steve Hudak, Chair of the AUA Young Urologists Committee. Today's episode features Dr. Julie Riley presenting her perspective as an academic urologist on the top 10 things I wish I knew before I started practicing, on a panel discussion at the Young Urologists Forum at AUA 2019 in Chicago.
Okay, well, good morning. I would like to thank Dr. Andona and Dr. Hudak and the AUA Young Urologists Committee for inviting me to do this. I can't say that I'm the absolute expert in this, but I'll do my best. So I have the side of academic medicine. As you heard, I'm well within academia. Again, I'm still learning and trying to figure this out, so please feel free if there's other answers or other people who feel differently, let me know. This is really only my experience, so not limited to that. I'm in academia, so you have to know my whole pedigree. Right, that's the rules. I grew up in rural Missouri. I did my undergrad at WashU and then went on to do med school at St. Louis University. And I am forever grateful to Dr. Jim Cummings for showing me the way into urology. I never thought I wanted to be a urologist, but thank God. I then did my residency at University of Missouri in Columbia, where very nicely Dr. Cummings actually followed me over, and about halfway through I got to work with him again. And this was a very small clinically based residency. I had 5 attendings for my 6 years, so it was a very small, very intimate program. And when I chose to do my fellowship in my 3rd year, because I really wanted to teach, I wanted to do research, I really wanted to be the super specialist in stone disease. Like, that was really what I wanted to do. All of my attendings' jaws dropped and thought, what? Because I was one of the first ones to go, and one of the first ones to go into academic medicine. So I had very little guidance in this and learned a lot of things through that process. So kind of shaped a little bit of how I decided what I wanted to do. I then went on to do my fellowship in Pittsburgh, which was a really large program. I'm sure lots of people know this. I had 3 attendings just for my fellowship, so that was really different than what my residency was like, a very different work environment. It was a 2-year program, so I did a year of research, I did a year of clinical work, and I came in as a clinical instructor, which was super important to me to teach residents and to still be able to do a little bit of general urology while I was doing endourology. So how I got to New Mexico, there was a job, and I accepted it. Okay. I started in 2013. You can see all of my titles, but essentially I'm an assistant professor. Okay. I am the only fellowship-trained endourologist in the entire state of New Mexico. It's the 5th largest state in the country, so geographically, please keep that in mind, what I'm doing. As mentioned, I do robotics, laparoscopy. My big practice is stone disease. I still do general urology because there's not enough urologists, and also I very weirdly do renal transplants as well. I'm a resident and student educator, and I cram a lot of stuff into 5 days a week. So right now I cram an entire day of clinic. It's really 1.5 days crammed into one. I have 2 OR days that are sort of interesting. I do a half day of transplant administrative stuff and like listing things, and then 1 full academic admin day. So a couple things about academics, the contracts, like everyone wants to hire a lawyer and do all this stuff. My contract is like maybe half a page, maybe. It's really, really challenging to change the very simple university contracts because essentially you have the same contract that you have for an anthropologist, the chemistry guy, the law professor, and the urologist. But where you can really negotiate is all of your incentives, your RVUs, your equipment that you need, OR time, academic time, clinic time. Your salary is probably not where you're going to do a lot of negotiating, at least on your base salary, but a lot of the other aspects of it you can really play with, and some of your professional funds, your times to go to meetings, just like this, those things are things you can negotiate through. And then the tenure versus clinical tract. So I was lucky enough to come in as a flex tract is what our program has. So for 3 years, you get to decide. And I ultimately chose the clinical route because really I didn't see any advantage one way or another. But you really want to be careful if you choose a clinical route that if you decide to move programs, that you can still maintain that same level and that other programs will actually respect that. Our clinical route has a pretty robust way of being required to get promoted in that. So what was really easy for me? The environment. I really understood academic medicine. I really hadn't seen anything else, so it was pretty easy for me to work in that environment, understand the politics behind that. Again, the 5th largest state in the US. I am the only endourologist. I don't advertise at all. I became the instant expert, right? I walked in the door, everyone gave me their stone patients. I have a very unique environment where I don't really have to worry about insurance or reimbursement. I'm not sure my hospital really likes me saying this, but the reality is we're a safety net hospital. We take a lot of patients. I have a set salary, so to me, I don't really have to worry about that. That's a changing environment, and not every academic center is like that. Again, that was just what was easy for me. But on the flip side, teaching residents is really hard. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm still trying to figure that out. When you first start, you're trying to figure out what equipment do you want? What reputation do you want in the operating room, in your clinic? How do you want your patients to respect you, to look at you? And now you're also expected to hand your instruments over to somebody who you barely even know and you don't know what you're doing. So that's a very challenging thing as well. Changing a big institution, this is like an air carrier that you're trying to change direction, maybe 180 degrees. The patterns are really set in academics. There's a lot of, it's a huge institution that you're working in, and mine is actually fairly small. So that can be a real challenge. So I thought I was a really responsible resident. I thought I took care of my patients really well, but the real world is very different, right? I had to, in residency and in fellowship, I was operating 4 or 5 days a week, and I thought I was following those patients pretty well, but once you're an attending, the buck stops with you, and you're not operating 4 or 5 days a week. And in fact, when you do operate 4 or 5 days a week, it gets pretty tiring and it's pretty stressful. So I was a little surprised at how hard that was. I work in an incredibly underserved area. There are not enough urologists, there's not enough equipment, there's not enough robots, there's not enough OR time, there's not enough, except there are plenty of patients. So that was also very challenging. So what do I wish I could go back and tell myself? You don't know everything, that's okay. You're not gonna be perfect. Ask for help. It's okay. A lot of people, even if they're not necessarily an endourologist or they're not within your field or they're not even a urologist, they're still probably going to be able to help you and give you some guidance. And if you can't find that person, you know what? Fake it till you make it. You'll figure it out. This was a really valuable lesson in life. Knowing how to run a clinic is one of the most valuable things. I said I cram a day and a half of clinic into 1 day. That's solely because I understood how to run a clinic and run it efficiently and keep my patients fairly happy and fairly on time. The number of surgeries I did doesn't really matter, but knowing how to make good surgical decisions really does. A lot of the things I do right now is not what I did in residency or fellowship, and it's an ever-changing process. So figuring out how do you adapt, how do you learn new technologies is really important, particularly in academics, because we want to be more on the cutting edge. Our residents are challenging us to learn those new things and keep up to date. It's really important to understand those things. My colleagues are super important. Not only do they take call for me, like right now they're taking call for me while I'm here, but they also share the same philosophy of how to train residents. And that's an incredibly important thing whenever you're going into academics, because it's not just your practice, it's actually how do you train, how do you build the whole division or department as a whole. And if you don't share at least similar philosophies, you're gonna clash really quickly and it's gonna be a real challenge for you. And I think it's important to understand what your role is, what your niche is. How do you actually serve your department or your division? I'm a division, not a department of urology, so understanding where I fit in the division, but also in the department of surgery as well is a really important role. If you go into academics, please write everything down. When you go up for your dossier preparation for promotions, it's a really time-consuming process, and it hits somewhere between 5 to 7 years into your career where you are really busy and really just finally getting running and doing stuff that you understand, and now all of a sudden you have to do a major dossier preparation. Keep track of everything from day one. I mean, if you open a door for a medical student, write it down. I mean, they will count that stuff. So it's really important that you keep track of that stuff and brag about it, in all honesty. If you complain enough, you too can be on the committee, okay? The reality is this is where you can get your voice heard, though, so don't say no to too many committees. I mean, sometimes really you can make the difference, even very young in your career, and you can really have a lot of say of how you practice medicine. But it is true, you'll end up on a committee. It's okay to say no to some of those offers. Don't say no too often, they'll stop asking you, which maybe that's not bad, but in academics you probably do want to say yes sometimes. When you do say yes, make sure you do it, okay? It's your reputation on the line. Make sure you do it. You're going to have to do some not so fun things, some not so fun committees, some not so fun jobs to get the things that you really, really want, like ease of practice, building up, for me, building a stone center, things like that, getting more operating room time. The more engaged you are, the more change you make. So again, if you turn down all those committees, no one's really going to listen to you, no one's really going to change for you. But the more engaged that you get, the more change you actually can influence. And advocacy is not a dirty word. When I was a resident, I kind of felt that way. But what I've really come to realize is that I'm really the best voice for a lot of my patients, and to go and really advocate for them and really explain what the situation is like where I'm practicing. Listen, you can love your institution a lot, but they may not love you back. That's not to say they're not going to support you. That's not to say that they aren't going to find you a valuable resource, but you're replaceable. I mean, that's the harsh reality. And on top of it, they have a lot of other interests that are going on. They might have trauma. They might have, they're trying to build up their general surgery program. They're trying to build their medicine program. Any number of things that the institution is really looking at with a lot of moving parts, and urology is such a small little area of that. So they will support you, but realize that they may not really be there the way that you think they should be. And your academic center is not going to, quote, help you do your academic endeavors. They want you to produce clinically. And so finding time to do your research is actually pretty challenging. You have to set aside that time. You have to really work at it to get that done. Again, that's not to say that academic centers aren't going to support you, but just realize that they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that they're looking at. So you need to protect yourself and be your best advocate. But I still have fun. Okay. So anyway, I do want to say thank you to the Young Urologists Committee for putting this together, and hopefully you guys found this helpful. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to the AUA Inside Tract podcast, an official podcast of the American Urological Association. For more information, please visit auanet.org.